Well, it's time to hop off because we reached the final E.G.O of the Season 4 Limbus Pass, and that E.G.O is Heathcliff's Binds. Heathcliff's Binds is a VoV level E.G.O with an 18 base and a plus 15 roll that deals blunt damage. It has a, holy smokes, is that a 7 attack weight? That's interesting. And after attack, for 3 turns, lose 10 SP at turn end. So, like Otis's bind, it initially costs not that much, but it ramps up because you start losing SP. That is interesting way to take sanity loss. And it's pretty good because you're going to mostly likely roll your positive coin, which on both the E.G.Os is a good thing. And after attack, next turn gain 20 bind, 1 before the king and binds, and 2 attack power up. On hit, inflict 1 bind next turn, inflict 4 sinking, inflict 4 tremor, and inflict 1 tremor burst. What is the King of Binds? Well, the King of Binds is a effect that you can apply to yourself using this E.G.O. And I'll set up a scenario of what it does. So, let's say you're using Sunshower Heathcliff, and you're fighting Papa Bongi and 3 little Bongies. So, what will happen is you attack one of the Bongies, right? Now, you deal 50 damage with your skill 3, and your skill 3 is a sloth skill. So, 2 enemies on the field with the least HP will also take however damage you dealt, and 100% of it. So, since you did 50 damage, the 2 other Bongies that are not being attacked will take 50 damage of sloth damage as well, since they have less health than the Papa Bongi. We're starting off very solid with this E.G.O, but that doesn't stop because the passive Chains of Binding. Combat start at 4+ highest resin that includes this skills apply 3 offense level up and 3 defense level up to self and allies who are in the resin chain. But if that resin chain was an absolute resins chain, you will apply 2 additional offense level up and defense level up, which is a very, very solid passive, especially if you're using a team that focuses on resonances, which is probably going to be pretty common because a lot of these IDs and E.G.Os recently have been resonance focused. Like I said earlier, you'll be losing not the average from VoV or even from He or Teth, you'll be losing a Zayn cost for some reason, which will be a whopping 10 sanity, which is interesting. I mean, you'll end up losing 40, because for 3 turns you'll lose 10 SP, and this is 10 SP, so you'll be losing 40 in total, but it'll cost you 2 Lust, 4 Gloom, 2 Pride, and 3 Envy, which is somewhat expensive, but all VoVs are. Your resistances will change to Fatal to Sloth, Fatal to Gluttony, Ineffective to Gloom, Ineffective to Pride, and Endured to Envy. Now, I did not mention this on Otis's E.G.O review, but both of these binds, when you corrode them, they will cost you 35 sanity, which is more than it would cost if you corroded a Zayn, but less than if you corroded an average VoV. If you corrode this E.G.O, your rolls will change to a 35 at base with a negative 15 roll. It will still be blunt damage, and you'll still have 7 attack weight. After attack, next turn gain 20 bind, 1 before the king, and gain 3 attack power up. So before the king is a little different to before the king and binds, but I'll explain that in a minute. After the attack, next turn apply 20 bind, 3 attack power up, and 2 gloom damage up to other allies in the order of deployments. Interesting. The number of affected allies grows with the highest gloom or pride resonance, subtract 2 to a maximum of 4. And on hit, you'll inflict 3 bind next turn, 4 sinking, 4 tremor, and you'll burst tremor. So, let's talk about Before the King. This effect is almost identical to Before the King and Binds, but instead of dealing 100% the damage you do to 2 enemies with the lowest HP, you'll deal 50% of the damage you dealt to 2 enemies with the lowest HP. So, it's a bit of a downgrade, but it's still not even remotely bad. Well, the clock strikes that time again. It's time to rate the E.G.O. Now, starting off with Drip, like we always do, it's got a very similar look to, well, very similar, it looks the same. Looks the exact same as Otis's binds. And on Corrosion, it is a tiny bit different than Otis's binds, and I think I like this binds a little bit more than like Otis's binds, but not nearly enough to put it like anything above it. So it's going to be sitting at a 9, which is very solid, so you can't complain about that one. So the strength of this E.G.O. The strength of this E.G.O. is phenomenal. Has an alright roll on base, has a pretty good roll on Corrosion. The attack weight is up the wazoo, it's phenomenal, and you're before the king and before the king of binds, dealing more damage to enemies, which pretty much just gives you more attack weight. Pretty much gives your normal attacks attack weight. All the attack power up, all the gloom damage up to your allies, the sinking, the tremor, the binds, the passive that gives you more offense level up, more defense, more offense level up again. All that comes together to say, I think this is going to be a whopping 10 in strength. Mainly because the before the king and before the king and binds that you inflict to yourself, but all the attack power up and all the buffs you give to your allies would definitely make this like an 8 if it didn't have before the king and before the king and binds. So that's going to be a very, very solid 10. And at the usefulness, once again, buffing your allies, buffing yourself, it's really, really useful. But I have to take a bit away because you inflict yourself with so much bind. That is the drawback of this E.G.O, which I hate to say it, but it takes a lot away from the usefulness. It definitely takes a couple points off the usefulness at least. So, as much as I'd like to give this like a 9 or a 10, I'm going to have to give it like 7.8, 7.9, almost 8. I guess 8. I might as well round it up to 8, but it would be higher, but it's just held back by the bind you give yourself and the amount of sanity it costs you to use this. It's just, oh, it's so close to being perfect. It is just so close.